All right, let's start. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our third
Oh,
session.
okay.
Let's start. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our third session. I am Benedict, and I am the project manager of 032 Play, and I will be your moderator for today. And joining us right now is Louie Cacho. He is the head of business development in ONIC Philippines, and he will be teaching us everything there is to know about business intelligence in the realm of esports. Let's welcome Louie Cacho. Good evening, Louie.
Uh, Good evening, Benedict. Yeah, thanks for the really quick intro. Yeah, so before I get into the talk, I just like to thank everyone for for coming out tonight, for spending your Saturday night on this talk. I know we're in the middle of a pandemic right now, so I guess it's a cool way to spend your Saturday night. So Saturday night lives or like that. So yeah, I'd also like to thank the 032 Play team for tapping me for this talk. Really excited to be giving this talk because to me it's really great that we have organizations like 032 Play sort of pushing esports within education. So I think they really go hand in hand because to us at ONIC, we really see esports as part of the future and a real viable career path now and in the future as well, as it just keeps growing as an industry. So to dive straight into the talk, in terms of topics covered. So first, I'll just give you a really quick intro on who I am, just so you know it's not some rando just giving the talk, and at least you know that I have some knowledge, some background in the space. I'll also be getting into an esports industry overview. And then a quick sort of discussion on the business side of esports teams, and I'll get into selling esports stories. You'll find out more about that as we go along with the talk. So just really giving a quick background on who I am. As I mentioned earlier, I wouldn't want to be talking to you guys unless I thought I was I guess qualified to do so. So I'm Louie Cacho, head of business development at ONIC Esports PH, as mentioned. Little side note: when in all my photos, I always look like I'm about to go to the bathroom, as you can see in that photo there. Yeah, as a head of business development, it's sort of like like a interesting title because it's not very defined as like sales, marketing, or something like that. So basically, what this means is, in terms of the realm of esports, I handle everything that has to do with ONIC making money. So what that includes is the side of brand management. So sort of managing the brand of ONIC, working with our content agency, Evident, in order to create compelling content for our team and for our sponsors as well. With this comes sponsorship acquisition, making sure we have a steady flow of new sponsors and clients to do work with, as well as once we actually get those sponsors on board, doing some sponsorship relationship management, making sure we're reporting all the content, making sure we're showing them that all the stuff we've done for them, and just sometimes drinking with the clients for the players and talents, because at ONIC we really see our players not just as pro players but as talents as well. So we broker deals in case certain companies want to do sort of marketing collabs with our players, because they have quite a bit of following online, and at the same time also limiting player trash talk to make sure that we sort of have a very brand healthy space for teams, which is a bit ironic because in every game I play, like ML, Valorant, League, probably one of the most toxic players you'll meet, but that's discussion for another day. So yeah, in terms of really get, so that's basically who I am and what I do for ONIC on a daily basis. With ONIC for about 8 months now, and I've come to learn quite a bit about the esports space, and I've also had extensive experience with companies such as Mineski International and Unilever as well. So, getting straight into the actual topics, before getting into anything, I wanted to start with a bit of an esports industry overview. Now, I'm sure a lot of you are already very familiar with esports and the space, but just in case there's some of us out there that aren't too familiar and are joining this more as a discovery talk and sort of trying to learn more, I always like to start with this overview. So, just a very, very basic definition of esports. To me, I see esports as organized competitions using multiplayer video games with a spectator audience in mind. So, to me, esports is really a spectacle. It's meant to, have high entertainment value because of the very, very high skill cap, as well as, and what that does is for me, it really draws a very interested and engaged audience to watch and consume content around esports. So getting into this, I wanted to give a few numbers about esports and everything on that realm, just so that we're all on the same page in terms of the industry. So I always do this because as a person, a bit of a nerd, numbers are my love language. Everything that I do really revolves around numbers, even within my job. So in terms of esports as a global industry, interestingly enough, back in 2019, esports actually hit the $1 billion industry for the first time. Now, this isn't video games. This is just esports, which is insane. It's basically it was already 50 billion peso industry, and in 2020 that actually grew to $1.1 billion in revenue, which is 15.7% growth versus 2019. Now, for $1 billion industries, I guess that's not normal for it to be growing still that fast, and even the audience is growing really fast. Esports is hitting the mainstream faster than anyone ever expected. There are about 5 million total audience for esports in 2020, which is up 11.7% versus 2019. So with this, a lot of this audience is actually very young. According to the global web index, 44% of 16 to 24-year-olds recently watched some sort of esports live stream in the past year. So it's crazy that this is growing so fast. It's already huge, but we get bigger and bigger and bigger. One thing that actually made esports growth in 2020 so strong was actually, weirdly enough, the pandemic. A lot of industries actually, were hit hard by the pandemic, but esports was one of the industries that was not only resilient, but even sort of exploded even more in the pandemic. So what happened was, because there was no content available for stuff like the NBA, for MMA, for football, for such a long time, people were looking for some sort of like live event to be able to keep them busy, keep them entertained, especially when they were bored at home during the pandemic. And as you can see in the Time magazine article, with something needing to fill that void, stadiums went quiet, so esports was really having a moment. So with all mainstream stuff on hold, esports basically catapulted into the mainstream faster than anyone ever expected. So mobile esports tournament viewerships were up 75%. Viewership on YouTube gaming streams was up 15%. Viewership on Twitch was up 10%, etc., etc., etc. So the logic behind this was sort of, I guess people were, really looking for something to do, something to keep them busy, and they turned to video games. A lot of people got a lot more into video games. So obviously you're not going to be able to go out or do anything, so you stay in, you enjoy your video games. That gets you more into the video games, and for video games with strong esports league, Dota, ML, even people sort of gravitated towards watching this, and really saw this in, even because just for background, ONIC predominantly competes in ML aside from having some other game titles. And we saw that our viewership for tournaments grew from like 1.1 million views per game to up to 3.5 to 4 million views per game over quarantine. The great thing is it's actually sustained over that time period. So with esports growing and becoming bigger and bigger as a space, and the revenue getting bigger, I wanted to take a deep dive into how the esports ecosystem actually works, how the industry sort of functions as a whole, and what actually goes on within the industry. So I prepared a very simple esports ecosystem graphic for just for everyone's benefit. So you can overcomplicate esports. You can make it like a multi-layered graphic that has like so many different arrows, so many different diagrams. But honestly, I just like to break it down to this because these are really the big buckets that are under esports. So if you think teams such as ONIC compete in games such as Mobile Legends, organized by leagues like the Mobile Legends Premier League or MPL, which are distributed on platforms like Facebook Gaming, Twitch, Nemo TV, etc., which serve as content for fans who support teams. So it kind of just keeps going around in a circle, which is pretty cool because that means it's quite self-sustaining. Things sort of like click into place and just move. So that's sort of the operational side. That's how everything basically functions. Then there's also the business side of things. On the financial side, investors, more specifically venture capital firms, are very interested in esports, the space of esports, because they see it as sort of like a sort of offshoot of the digitalization of the world, and that's sort of going into the digitalization of sports and entertainment. So these investors finance the growth of different sectors of the ops ecosystem. So, they're investors for teams, for games, for leagues, for platforms, for fans. There's investors all over the place trying to put their money in what they think will do the best. So with that, on the other side of the financial ecosystem, game developers use esports as marketing for their games, actually, because for the bigger esports leagues, they have massive viewership. They get people into their games even more, and they create stars that um, go past just their games and into the mainstream. And then brands, on the other hand, are the revenue angle of esports. So they use esports as a communication channel to reach very engaged young audience. So because these teams usually gain massive following, massive viewership, etc., brands want to sort of ride on this and create all content with them, because it's an easier way for these brands to sort of get into the universe of these young people, especially Gen Zs like us, who are very used to using ad blockers. I'm sure, like, just think of the last time you actually played a whole ad on YouTube and did skip ads. So that's really, so going through something like esports is another way for brands to be able to sort of give their messaging in such a way that fans are actually enjoying something, the brand people are enjoying something. So everyone's happy at the end of the day. Now, in terms of the meat of my talk, I'm gonna actually focus on the team side of things because, well, number one, I guess I run the business ops of a team, so I'd like to say that's where really my expertise lies. And on the other hand, more on a practical note, if I discussed every part of the ecosystem, this would probably be like a 5-hour talk. It would be really, really long, and I'm sure no one would want to pay attention to a 5-hour talk. So that's really where the focus is going to lie. So getting into it, I'll give you really a more in-depth view of esports teams, like basically the business side of things, and this will translate into how to actually sell and do and make money within esports. So on the topic of making money, ever since I started working in esports, whenever I tell someone that I manage an esports team, the first question that comes to mind is like, how the heck do you make money? And what most people assume actually is that, because I guess for most people, even if you don't really follow esports, every so often you see sort of a prize pool, or you see the money that's being won by a certain team, like stuff like that one Fortnite 9-year-old made like $10 million in a day sort of goes viral. So people always assume that prize pool is team revenue, and that's always what's happening. People are like, wow, that's 1.2 billion pesos. That's crazy. All these esports teams must be making a killing, really, in terms of winning the prize pools, winning money off of prize pools and everything. The interesting thing here is that that's not necessarily the case. While prize pools do sort of have an indicator of how much a certain games esports ecosystem is making, because obviously your prize depends on how much everything is making. In terms of a team's revenue, it's actually a very, very small percentage of overall revenue. Reason being is that most of the money from prize pools actually goes to the players, interestingly enough. So about 70 to 85% of prize pool goes to players. So if you saw that 1.2 billion TI prize pool, almost all of that is really going to the players. Really, and I mean, it makes sense also because they're the ones really working hard, working like crazy to get to this goal of winning these championships. So it also functions as sort of an incentive for them to really strive harder for the championship, past just the glory and whatever that comes with that. So if you look at this revenue breakdown, um, the prize pools here, if you can see my mouse, it's actually only like 9% of how much a team makes, and it's a really tiny percentage of overall revenue. The sustainability of the business aspect of things for esports teams is mostly driven by sponsorship and advertising. Because as I mentioned earlier, once you compete in these large tournaments that are broadcasted on platforms, you're you're exposing your team and your players and your brand to so many viewers, so many fans. So brands want to sort of jump in on this because the fans in esports, which I love fans of esports. I personally am addicted to anything esports and have been for, I don't know, like 8, 10 years now. We're such a, I guess, one thing I've noticed is we're such an engaged group. We're so into the games because obviously, we're passionate about the games. We're also passionate about the teams we support, just like any other sport, but I guess to an even more intense degree. So brands want to be able to sort of expose their own messages and their offerings to us, the very engaged fan base, because a lot of these brands also have products and services that are really perfect and relevant for our consumption. So that really makes up 74% of things. Now, everything else makes up pretty small, 26%. So things like ticket merch, esports betting and fantasy, prize pools, amateur and micro tournaments. These are still important, and they really still do contribute significantly to the cash flow of an esports team. But when you really think about it, you have to reframe your esports business mindset. As an esports team, you're not just a team. You have to really think about it in the sense that you're an esports media company. Your brands are your customers, given that 75% of your revenue comes from brands and chips advertising. So you're not selling winning teams, amazing plays, skilled players. And although of course be winning and having crazy good players obviously helps when it comes to building your own brand and your own following, what you're actually selling is an engaged fan base, interesting content, and rapidly growing following. So what that means is that you're actually selling the right for these brands to be able to communicate to your fan base. With that, you have to be very, very discerning about which brands you partner with, because at the end of the day, without your fans, you're nothing. So you have to really care about what you expose your fan base to in terms of branded messaging. You don't want to expose them to faulty brands, brands that push, I guess, bad products, or even like products that don't make sense to your fan base or things like that. At the same time, you're selling content. So what you do within an esports team really is not just your brand slaps a logo on one of your posts and that's it. You really also be functioning sort of as a consultant for them. So a lot of these brands, they're run by people that aren't necessarily too aware of the esports space. You're lucky if you work with someone on a sponsorship or advertising side that is actually an esports fan. But most of the time, these people aren't too aware of the space. So what you have to do is really give them ideas for how to create content that sort of shows their brand, mentions their brand in such a way that people actually care about it and enjoy that experience. At the same time, because esports is a space that's growing so fast, as mentioned earlier, you're selling a rapidly growing following. So if a brand invests a certain amount of money into sponsoring you or advertising with you, they're not just sponsoring you because of how much following you have now. They're sponsoring you, let's say, for 12 months because of how much following you'll have in 6, 8, 12 months, because they want to grow as you grow. And that's generally sort of one of the philosophies there. So with this, one of the main benefits that comes with this is that brand teams struggle to understand Gen Z as a whole. I think there's a lot of mystery around Gen Z in the brand space right now. If you read articles about Gen Z, if you read data graphics about Gen Z, people are generally very, very confused about overall what Gen Z is. But what esports provides is, really high interest and engagement from Gen Z. So 40% of each fans are Gen Z. At the same time, an anti-ad block way to convey brand messages to Gen Z. The only thing is, as a brand, you still shouldn't be annoying about how you message, because at the end of the day, if it's still bad content, no one's going to care about your content. And at the same time, it's a way for these brands to sort of stay relevant among the market if, again, executed right. So you have to realize that you're really providing these brands a platform to sort of connect with a market that they might not be too familiar with. But you as a person within esports, in case anyone in the audience really wants to get into esports and is passionate about working in the space, you really, for me personally, I am Gen Z, so I'd like to think that I know the market very, very well. But at the same time, even if you're not in Gen Z, it doesn't mean you can't know the market. You just have to be really, mindful about this, because it's one of the biggest things brands look for. Because it's mentioned, it's such a big part of esports is Gen Z, and I remember reading an article that for millennials, the biggest sort of like cultural content for them was music. That's changed significantly, and for Gen Z, it's actually gaming and esports. So we're the generation that have sort of like had a perspective shift and have moved from, I mean, obviously music and all YouTube and all this is still important, but gaming has sort of pushed to the forefront. Now, of course, with this, as you can see here, esports sort of has an inherent value to provide to brands. But that doesn't just mean that your job is as simple as going like, hey, brand, market with us. That's it. And then that's it. You get the 7-figure sponsorship deal. It really is quite a bit more complicated than that. And what I'll show to you now is actually what I like to call selling esports stories, and it's a simplified model for how an esports team sort of packages this, this inherent value of be working with Gen Z, having that engaged audience, having a large fan base, and how you package all of that together, how you develop that, and sell it to brands to obviously have great revenue streams. So with this, it's sort of like it's pretty simple. I like to keep things into threes. If you notice, like my past slides were a bunch of 3 bullet points. So it's a 3-step process. Don't worry. It sounds like I'm like doing networking right now, but trust me, it's not. Don't worry. It's a 3-step process, and it's sort of like breaking it down, making it easier to digest, so that this talk doesn't take too long, and you guys can sort of like digest it easier. So step 1 is really understanding what makes your team different. So within the space of esports, you're all playing the same game. All your players are good because you're all pro teams, and all your players, I guess, have some level of something that makes them interesting. So there's a lot of similarities to the teams. So one of the difficult things is really picking out what you do the best that no one else can do. And people should never say winning. And I mean, you can, but it's not the best strategy because winning comes and goes. I mean, some seasons you're on top, some seasons you're not. That's just the fact of life. So you really have to figure out what about your team is something that stands out, is interesting, and that no one else can copy. So as mentioned here, in terms of 3 differentiation principles, no one likes a copycat. Consuming repetitive content sucks. There are some teams within the esports space that like to copy merch from 100 Thieves, content of even brands like ONIC, etc. I'm not making patama an esports team. Trust me, I'm not. I kind of am, but I'm not. So no one likes that. So with that, you have to sort of define what your brand stands for as an esports team and stick to it. And that takes a lot of work. It might seem simple, but if you're doing it right, you're doing a lot of work to get there. So there's so many different ideas that you think that can make you stand out, but you have to keep asking yourself, is this really unique, and is this something no one else can copy? And and the way to get to that and to define that is really to look at what you have under your team. Standing out must come from something inherent and unique with your team and players. Now, in terms of this, of course, with every set of players and everything, you can sort of tweak it a little bit, change the narrative a little bit, but your differentiation must still sort of like be rooted in your branding as a team and everything. Because once you approach sponsors and advertisers, you want to really show that you have a strong brand, strong differentiation. It's not just like, I have more followers, therefore you should go with me. That it should really be like you're aligned with what they stand for, etc. And then you can sort of create partnerships from there. So with every step, I'm going to give a bit of a case study of something we've done at ONIC, just so that it's not just up in the air. I'm giving you like real examples. So an interesting case study of this was actually the Mobile Legends Pro League Season 6, which was like a few months ago. And this was one of the seasons where we really, I think, were able to differentiate things very, very, very strongly, and the numbers showed it. So ONIC was, the undisputed best-looking pro ML team in the Philippines. So the other teams and the market, like the other pro teams, were not exactly didn't exactly have the most clear skin or the best builds or best faces or anything. And we noticed that through a lot of our content, because people are always commenting on our stuff like pogi ni basic ni dilar guapo nila, etc., etc. So we noticed that for MPL season 6, in terms of what would differentiate us and sort of like where we were going to stand out, it really lied in sort of creating a narrative around sort of this idea that we're really the best looking team. So what we did was we did a lot of fan service content. So similar to how K drama, I mean sorry, not K drama, like K-pop people do stuff like that. And so we highlighted the players' looks, we created content around this, and actually in the 3 months of MPL season 6, we grew our page by about 97%. So showed that something like this was working, and that it gave us a lot of like differentiation. Something that if you really make the checklist of, is it something that other teams can copy? No, because their players might be ugly. Sorry, I'm sorry for being rude, but they might not be good looking. So if it is it something that can really stick to our brand, it's something that as players come and go, you kind of have to change that narrative a little bit. But we sort of like built on that boy band narrative and sort of created a lot of content around it. So we did a lot of as I mentioned, fan service photos. A lot of our in-house photographer, see Madam Tammy, she made sure that the players were, she taught them how to pose like models, how to look good for photos, and this attracted, a lot of brands that wanted to work with good-looking people. For example, Mountain Dew, who actually is very, adamant about working with people that have clear skin, that look good, etc., like James Reed, etc., and stuff. So we were able to sort of strike a deal with them because we were very different with other teams. We really cared about the visual image of how our players looked and everything, and we sort of built up a case from there. And so that's just an example of how what we looked at was what our players had and what the story was that was different from everyone else, and how to sort of translate that into content. Second is with step 2 is really translating differentiation into fan acquisition. So what this means is that this is not something that I guess is like standard within esports or anything, but it's more of like a marketing sort of thing. It's very similar to the marketing funnel. I'm not sure if you guys are all if there are many marketing students here, but there's something called the IDA model, which is like awareness, interest, desire, etc., etc. So that's sort of a funnel that starts from like people don't care about your brand all the way to people who really love your brand, and we sort of modeled this and created our own version, which is called the fan funnel. So at the very top, it's unaware esports fans or unaware people in general. They don't necessarily have to be esports fans. They're basically people who don't know anything about your team, might not even know anything about the game you're playing or the league you're competing in. Basically, they don't care at all. After that, the next stage of the funnel are the aware but apathetic. So these are people that might, for example, the case of ONIC, they might know ONIC, they might know some players, but it's not like they care. It's like they might support another team, they might play the game and see your faces on the game, or like in general, they just don't care, but they know what you are. Then you have casual fans who sort of will watch a game here and there. Mostly what we noticed are these are people who actually are bigger fans of one player or two players in particular, that also somehow kind of enjoy interacting with the team as well. But more than that, they're really fanboy or fangirl of one player. And then the next level down is the engaged fans. So these are fans who really love the team for the team. It's comment on your stuff, they like your stuff, they share your stuff, and they sort of really enjoy supporting the team. Then you have your loyal super fans, this is the holy grail of all fandom, especially for esports teams, because these are the people who are really, really like in love with your team. They might love certain players, but they buy jerseys. In our case, for a while, people were sending food to our boot camp. They were interacting with their players. They were giving them Christmas gifts, birthday gifts. These are like the really, really super fans. And the great thing about them is that more than just fans, because the beauty of esports is that it's all happening online. You actually have chances to interact with them. And a lot of them actually become sort of like family or part of the team itself, because you interact with them, they talk to you. They're just really cool people also that are just super, super into the team. And they're the most, I guess, at the same time, quote unquote, monetizable fan base, because they'll really buy your merch, they'll consume any content that you share, that you create, and they'll really just be involved in what you do. So with this step, what's really important here is actually being able to move people down the fan funnel. So you really have to survey the market and understand where they lie in terms of being fans. So what this means is like you have to really take a good hard look at yourself. You can't be overly confident and say, oh, all my fans are super fans. That's just not true. You have to understand. Let's say for Onyx case before we started going serious with marketing, a lot of people were just unaware because for quite a while there wasn't a lot of content being created for Onyx, and so we really had to create strategies that would move unaware people to being aware, to being casual fans, to being engagement fan, to being loyal super fan. And what you have to do is really create a strategy to move them from one step to another. Because you really can't just move someone from being unaware to a loyal super fan. You really have to make a conscious effort to funnel people down, to push them little by little so that you have a large group of casual fans, you have a large group of engaged fans, and even a large group of loyal super fans if possible. And how this works is it's a bit of a mouthful. I like to call it test, optimize, test, re-optimize, and finalize. So what this is because you have your platforms, you have your player pages, you have your own pages, etc. You have a lot of leeway to sort of figure out what content works best. So as mentioned earlier with the team, um, we were posting game highlights for a while. We were posting all this content, but what we realized got the most engagement was actually very simple photo shoots where the players would look good, would highlight their look. We were able to notice after a lot of optimization, re-optimization, like what type of photos people liked, what type of captions would work, what time to post, and everything. And so all of that has to be like really scientifically figured out. It's different per team, it's different per fan base. But once you figure it out and nail it for your fan base, you can sort of create a model that is replicable. Basically, if you've done it with 100 fans, you can do it with 1 million fans. You can move a million fans from unaware to aware to casual to engaged to loyal. So it's really about creating something that you can replicate and scale so that your team is not just slowly engaging fans and recruiting fans. It's rapidly doing so because that's really how you make significant revenue out of esports, really creating a large fan base for you. So in terms of a case study for this, so with ONIC, what we did was we made sure that all our different social media channels actually had different roles in terms of moving people from different parts of the fan funnel downwards. So for example, Facebook was really awareness generator because obviously everyone in the country, our number one app for everything from chatting with someone that you think is your girlfriend that might not really be, all the way to buying toilet paper. Everyone does that on Facebook. So we saw it as an awareness generator. So it's meant to convert unaware consumers into aware consumers, and then ultimately they don't have to be like super fans right away, but even just to push them into the casual fan base. That's something we did. So in terms of how we did this through content, it was really more about consistency than anything, because we noticed that we were really doing well with the Facebook algorithm when it came to being very, very consistent about team updates, videos showing a bit about the player personalities and even gameplay updates. So what that did was it really sort of pushed awareness into, I guess, somewhat of the general esports general esports market in the Philippines, and it was really done through consistent content. And so it pushed a lot of awareness. So I'd like to think that ONIC has grown quite a bit from 2019 to 2020. We only had like 146K fans on Facebook on our ONIC page plus all our player pages back in 2019, and now we have like 1.5 million overall. So we're able to like grow that quite a lot just by doing a lot of consistent content, but also really targeting this, as mentioned, to what we thought would make us different. Then another thing we did was with Instagram, that was more of a loyalty driver. So this was really for turning fans into engaged fanboys and fangirls and ultimately loyal fans. So as I mentioned earlier, if you just look going back one slide, with the casual fans, one insight we had was that these fans used to follow one specific player or two specific players. So what we did was we drew them to our Instagram pages, because we would post a lot of fan service photos, or basically photos where the players look good of all our different players, distributing it evenly so that it was seen as like daily content, showing the daily life in the boot camp and general kalokohan of the players. And so this sort of drove a lot of casual fans to being very loyal and even super fans. So because let's say they had a certain idol, they would, they'd be able to get all the content they'd want on that player, and it ultimately translated into them loving our team as well. And so, and then with TikTok, what we did was sort of we used it as like a loyalty maintenance platform where we'd push even like content that wouldn't really feature the esports lives of our players, just so that people are more interested in their just general existence, I guess, outside of just being really good players. And something that also works with like YouTube. It's very good with like video platforms, but we really focused on TikTok because it's got like your fan acquisition rate is so high, and short form videos are, I guess, just easier to make in like high volume as well. So once you've done all of that, once you have you figured out what's different about you, once you've created that model from how to create people that are unaware all the way to, super fans, it's all about tying everything up by turning all the strategy you've done into a story. So if you really think about it, compelling concepts turn into compelling content. When you nail that differentiation and have that model in mind, you can sort of serve fans the stories they're craving to hear. This leads to like a lot of higher engagement. You reach more people, and even better receptiveness of your fan base to well executed branded message, both for teams and both for your team. So to promote your team's brand and for the sponsors' brands as well. So I think when I have like one sort of like guiding principle that sort of pushes me and like sort of guides everything I do in terms of wrapping all the strategy and turning it into a story. And that really is the product you're selling is the story you're telling. So what that really means is that you can do all the strategy, you can win all you want as a team, but if you're not telling a story about how you do it, no one's going to care about you. It doesn't matter if you're the best team in the world. You might even get some followers, but people aren't really going to build that connection with you because you really have to get people invested in your narrative, not just invested into your wins or your losses. Because the moment you keep losing, people won't care about you anymore. So you really have to get people to latch onto a narrative. And once you do this, and if you can perfect that art of storytelling, you'll have no problem selling first of all your team or the narrative of your team to fans. So your interaction goes past just wins and losses. Fans become engrossed in the narrative. So I mean, similar to like a movie, it's always so much more interesting when really follow the story. And like even with any series, I'm sure we've all binge watched for 12 hours straight on something or another. And that's the same sort of mindset you're trying to reach by creating a narrative with the teams. At the same time, additional revenue streams such as merch, fan events, etc., post-COVID become easier to push because you've created a larger monetizable fan base. And then an to brands. What that means is that fans about you. I mean, they might care about you a bit, but about brands, they really won't care still. So you really have to create that story so that you can insert brands in a more interesting light, and insert good brands, etc. And on the other side of things, on the more revenue side of things, because the fan side, like fan based development, is the product side. Now, selling to the brand side or selling to your actual customers, once you have this story, it's easier to identify brands with identities that align to your messaging. So these are basically brands that make sense with your own player narrative. It's not just like brand A wants to do marketing because whatever. There really should be something that aligns you so that it's effective. Then it's easier for you to sort of like blow their social media benchmarks out of the water due to your hyper engaged fan bases. So that means that you might not necessarily need and also face to boost your posts to get people really engaged with them. Also, it's easier even to draw brand people narrative. So what pitching to them, and as you keep building that relationship with them, they don't just care about you as their business partner, the same time, they're following how the team is doing. They're sort of wondering what's going on with these players. Like, and they're more interested to at least this relationship with the brand teams as well. So, a case study this ONIC Alaksan partnership that we did. So they're actually one of our branded partners. And so one aspect of our narrative that, I mean, I'm not sure how you might follow the L Pro scene, but one aspect of the narrative is really revolves around us constantly fighting for an MPL or Mobile Legends Pro League championship through, the pain of losing through two straight grand finals. It sucked, I know. It really sucked. But, life goes on. And so it was interesting because Alaksan really saw, because I'm assuming you guys know that Alaksan is also, pain relieving medicine or over the counter sort of thing. And so Alaksan saw this sort of alignment with us because when we pitched to them, we showed that, the team, keeps fighting through these struggles to keep going on. And at the same time, Alaksan was trying to push a hashtag Laban Lang as a branded asset for Alaksan within the esports community. And so what we did was we were able to sort of overshoot their internal digital marketing benchmarks with content that showed the players, fighting through, the pain of losing or even the pain of, not tips or even the pain of just trying to work really, really hard in all their training, etc. And we also allowed fans to share their own hashtag Laban Lang stories. So how this worked is, for example, as you can see on the left, Dilar, who's one of our players, had this quote about ang laban ko para sa aking minamahal sa buhay, etc. Basic, and then in the caption, he had this really long sort of caption about how even if he's lost an MPL, etc., and it hurt, he keeps fighting because he provides for his family. He's one of their breadwinners, etc., etc. And in the comment section, a lot of fans sort of shared. We showed that a lot of fans could share their own stories. And what would happen is that Dilar did a live stream where he would read these fans' stories and then call them on video call, sort of talk to them. So it added that sort of deeper layer of fan interaction. And so it did really well. And it's been something that we plan to keep doing moving forward. So that's basically one of the sort of case studies on how we sort of wrap our strategy up into telling a story. And so, just summarizing this selling strategy, just breaking it down back to the 3 steps. First step is really understanding what makes your team different, and then translating the differentiation into fan acquisition, and then tying everything together by turning your strategy into a story so that it's easier to sell this, to get fans latched onto narrative, and it's easier for brands to sort of align with you and also sell to these fans that are latched onto narrative. And so I guess that's how you sort of create the cycle of getting more brands, getting more advertisers to get on board to invest in you, etc. And so that's essentially my talk. So thank you so much, guys. I hope you guys learned a bit about how we function as a team, basically how we sort of do business and how we create stories that also make our fans love the team more and also love the brands that we work with. So I think there's a Q&A section after this. Would love to answer any questions you guys might have.
Yes, there is. Please stand by as we're about to proceed to our Q&A session.